going to make it start now, and I'm sure other folks will join us. So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us for this international funding webinar. And we are hoping at the end of today to explore a series of models, great information, some trade secrets around applying and winning international grants. We have on the panel to do some distinguished panelists and speakers who would run through a series of models based on their experiences and their coverage, international exposure on matters that's relevant to international funding and resource mobilization. So the African Union Science, Technology and Innovation Strategy for Africa in 2024 emphasizes that African states have the capacity or potential to at least contribute up to 1% of their GDP towards financing scientific research. But the point is, African leaders have always committed to increasing funding for national research programs for science and technology. But the point is, only a handful of countries have actually implemented it, even though there's been incredible commitments. And so in 2013, for example, Africa's gross expenditure in research and development was about 0.5% of the GDP. That is compared to 2.7% in North America, about 2.10% and 2.1% in South Asia, and about 2% in Europe, 1.7% in Asia. So, but the point is, even though it's been that case, nothing much has changed in the last 7 to 8 years. What seems to be the issue? Now, Africa was home to just about 2.4% of the world's researchers. That is, if you spread it across Africa, you'd have, say, 1.1% to sub-Saharan Africa and 1.4% to Northern Africa. This is comparable to 42% in Asia, 31% in Europe, and about 18% in North America. So in most African countries, research organizations depend wholly on the federal government to fund them. But the point is they now struggle to fund them. Now, research institutions, universities don't engage strategically well with private sector organizations or industry who can potentially fund them. Now, memorandums of understandings and MOUs that seems to exist, and even when they exist, and these MOUs can attract funding if well appropriated. But yet the point is, these MOUs are gathering dust on the shelf because they don't have operationalization. Now, these organizations can attract funding. I said, but the point is, solution-driven research with some commercial backing that can enable funding is not always in consideration, even when problems abound. It's usually an afterthought. Now, access to international funding opportunities is a struggle, and even when they apply for these funding, proposals are poor, not commercially viable, and grantmanship is deficient. So it's a whole mix of problems here and there. See, but the point is, as Africa witnesses an increase in private sector investment, technological development across different sectors, there is absolute need for national policy level considerations of sustainable funding and resource mobilization models that considers research as mandatory. See, but obviously there's a balance has to be created between the expectation of government at that high level, but also what can the individual do? If you depend on government, that is fine. But if government fails you, what do you do? What can the individual do differently to increase your capacity and capability to apply, attract, to source, to win international funding? So I'm hoping that, and trust me, we have on the panel today some incredible individuals who have been doing this for a long time. And so they will delve into the matter and help us navigate these different parameters and different frameworks. Now, just to let you know, for those who don't know this webinar has been sponsored by the Global Challenges Research Fund, Lancaster University's RECIRCULATE and Actuate project. This is a circular water economy project that has been focused on developing capacity in the circular water economy across different sectors in Africa. The countries of focus have been Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, Botswana, Malawi, and Zambia. And over the last 3 years, we've had some incredible engagements. And because of the COVID obstacle, if you like, there's been a need to engage further with partners and stakeholders using these sorts of webinars of specific subject matters of relevance and importance. And so on that note, with that kind of a framing, I think we can go straight into hearing this gentleman and lady who are willing to share with us their experiences and like I said, some trade secrets. So the first person I want to call to speak to us, it's I like to call him a good friend of mine. He's an accredited SME consultant, a certified expert in microfinance and microinsurance, and a sustainability professional with an extensive experience in banking in the areas of sales, credit, funding, retail banking, commercials, and SME banking. He's currently the head of structured products and a senior executive at Stanbic Bank in Ghana. It gives me absolute pleasure to welcome, to give us a talk, Mr. Stan Day. He's going to be speaking about the principles, banking funding principles, basic principles for individuals who want to think about approaching banks or financial institutions for funding opportunities. Over to you, Stan, my friend.
Okay, thank you. So let me share my screen quickly and good morning to everybody. And we take it up from there. Okay, so good morning again, and thank you, Prof. Akan. Akan is my very good friend, and
no, Prof, yes, but thank you.
We've been learning a lot from him. We've been doing this for some time now. Since 2015, we've been working in Lancaster. So it's great to see everybody again. Like Dr. rightly said, I will be going through the key principles, and from the key principles, we can agree how we can approach access to funding. The interesting thing that is happening now is like we all sit in two different silos. Academia believes they can only get money from international organizations and NGOs and others. And we also sit in our own space and we don't even know what academia does. One of the exciting things that I have learned from Lancaster is the situation where government, academia, and the business segment are working together. So as you can see on my slide, we are saying money is available, how do I get it? And we are basically talking about how do we get money from the academic side of things. That is why the academic sign is there. So I believe that by the time we finish this discussion, we have identified the common instrument that we use, especially in the financial sector, to give out funding, discuss different funding options at various stages of business development, and also understand the strategic implications of choice of funding instrument that you identify and use. Now, I mean, these are the basic funding sources when it comes to equity. So we have two main sources of funding, either equity or debt. So we'll start with equity, and basically equity is talking about how you put your own money into a business. Debt is normally when you are using somebody's money. So and equity again means that you can also have somebody who wants to have share of your business. So a third person can also put money in your business, which still means that they have interest, they want to be part of the management of the business and make sure that when the business works well, there is opportunity for them to benefit from dividends or what the positive outcome of these transactions are. So when we look at it critically, you see that it's personal. Most of the time when you are starting business, nobody really understands what you are doing. So they want you to use your own money so that if there is trouble, it's about you alone. Secondly, friends and family could put money together for you to help you start a business. Angel investors are those who, we call them angels because they look at what you are doing, or you put up this nice proposal and they believe in it because the figures and the storyline makes them feel that this is what is going to be successful, and they want to put money up front to get you to implement that. Venture capital investors that also have pool of money to help early businesses and later will normally exit when the business is stable and get out their money to fund another business. The IPO is an initial public offer, will be the situation where you are now a solid organization, so you are able to go to the open market to say, give me money to do my business. That's where you go to the stock exchange and all that to do that. So that is just a brief background of the equity sources. So this slide just tells us the type of people who are there to do some of these things. So angel investors is normally high net worth individuals investing in your business. So for impact investors, and again, we are saying ESG because the impact investment will be you will largely be focusing on environment and social governance issues. But you realize that most of these type of investment as well, the person doesn't want to stay in for all their life. They want to do it between 4 and 7 years and pull out so that they can use this same funding to help others. The IPO, like I rightly said, is selling of stocks, shares to the public. Small business usually are not at this level. So most of the time you have to groom yourself up to a point where people trust in you, they look at your figures, they believe that you can do this very well, and then you can launch into the public because you are well known. So that is basically the traditional sources of getting equity into business. Again, when we move along, you realize that these traditional sources are becoming, to a large extent, not obsolete to a large extent, but are getting to a point where now you have to use different sources. You can use some debt, you can use some equity, and that is where we are saying that now blended financing is the way to go, because then if, for instance, in academia or you are a business person and you want to do a project, there is the possibility for you to access, for instance, funding for technical assistance. You could access funding for feasibility studies, and some of this funding could be grants or or funding with very low interest rates that will help you to do what you do. So this type of equity financing, yes, is still there traditionally, but gradually we are rather moving away from only focusing that, okay, commercial banks only give debt, and then international organizations give equity, investment institutions do equity. We are moving away from that and looking at the situation where we bring all this together to help people feel more comfortable to use funding as and when they are appropriate. So for instance, if you go to a commercial bank to take a loan at an interest rate of maybe 22% in Ghana, that is not going to be helpful for you as a research person to be able to carry out your research. So let's see. So when it comes to equity financing, again, there are critical things that investors look at. And one of the critical things is internal rate of return, which basically talks about the growth that they anticipate in your business. So when you look at your cash inflows and all that, at what the point that you break even, that is what gives an indication of how this business is going to grow. The list that we have here just gives us an idea, depending on the type of funding you are going in for, what are the expectations from these investors or institutions or investment companies that want to work with you. So I don't think I need to go through the list. The list is there for all of us to see. So for instance, I mean, for a grant or subsidies, I mean, impact investment and all that, or free funds, I mean, people are not really too worried about whether your internal rate of returns is 2 or 3 or 5. They are fine because they believe in the work, or maybe it is even a situation where they know you cannot use expensive funds to do this. They are happy for you to have even a 0% internal rate of returns. So it's critical that whilst we put together that proposal or want to approach these institutions for funding, we take consideration of some of these benchmarks. Now for debt, like I said already, again, debt you can get from friends and family, commercial banks. So you see typical people like we from the commercial bank, normally everything we prescribe debt. If it is headache debt, if it's leg pain debt, everything is debt. But the truth is that debt doesn't solve every problem. The structure of your financing is very critical to your success. So for instance, if somebody is at the early stages of maybe doing a feasibility studies, and I go to give him debt and he has to be paying interest on it, I'm basically going to collapse that initiative at a very tender stage. And then governments can also give us some of these funds. So I've mentioned some of the people can give us that. So the debt can come also from a lot from development finance institutions for large-scale projects, and then private equity and venture capital also provides debt for us. So I've put this slide up because you see, when you are doing, we are putting together these proposals, one of the things that we want to watch out for is it a lender or an investor? And we all behave differently. A typical banker is a very conservative and risk-averse person. So most of the time, we want to see, okay, so when things go wrong, do you have a collateral for me to sell? Do you have something that I can fall on? We want to see things clearly. We want to see how you are going to use the money. You have to categorize it into capital expenses and operational expenses. Your cash flows need to be clear. So most of the time, we are not excited about referencing quotations and all that most of the time we at the academic field are excited about. You can quote anything that you can quote for me and support it with referencing, but I am just interested to see your cash flow and see whether I want to go with you or not. So it's important that whilst we approach some of these processes, we look at the audience. Investors will normally go in for, okay, what will be my returns in 3 years, 4 years, and what is your maybe your social environmental governance rating from MSCI and all those type of things, and believe that you can do this and do it well, and based on that, we'll give you money. Commercial banks are totally different. So as commercial banks or other financial institutions, what normally would they like to see in a proposal? Yes, definitely they want to see your vision and mission. What do you intend to do? What does the business success look like? So definitely that proposal should be able to come out clearly, the business success proposal. Now, the world has changed. It's not only about profit. It can also be for a social impact. Now we are talking about social return on investment and all that. So there are other ways of looking at what impact a business project or a research project or a research project that is being carried out will have on people and the planet. So this is not strictly only return on investment or return on equity and all that. Who are your clients? Again, these are some of the definitions that sometimes when in your academia especially, it doesn't make sense to you. Okay, we want to do a research to see whether we can do something. Why are you asking me about my clients? But whatever you do, there is an audience, there is somebody that will benefit. There is always needs to be a client. So that proposal that comes to my desk, I still want to know, who are you serving? Who is going to benefit? How are you going to make money out of it? Or who is going to benefit? How do you market or reach out to them? What is special about your business that others don't have? Why should I give you that money instead of another person? Who are the key players? So who are you working with? What is your structure? How will you make profit? Definitely, it's not everything that is profit yet, but I mean, in our type of world, profit attracts a lot of people. So if it's not profit, find a way of defining that profit in another way that attracts people. How is it going to save lives, for instance? What are the challenges that the business, including competition, needs to overcome? And some of the common mistakes that normally comes up is not making known one's weakness. Most of the time, people try to have weaknesses. And I've had the opportunity of talking to a number of institutions that put together proposals, and they'll say, "Oh, don't worry, I'll cook the figures for them." They think people believe that they can put the figures that looks nice, forgetting that whoever is reviewing the figures has more experience even in the field more than you. So it's just like me saying that, okay, I'm doing an international funding proposal and I'm giving a proposal to Dr. Akan, and I think that I have the expertise to do that better than him, which is not true. So I can put everything together. He can easily see through that proposal and say, look, this thing doesn't sound right to me. Absence of strategy, distribution strategy, for instance, is the critical business. So for instance, now we have situations where we are putting projects as like a waste to power. It's part of our Lancaster project. If you are going to do that and you are going to distribute those outcomes tomorrow. How are you going to do it, for instance? So it doesn't end with the research. It doesn't end with starting the project. How does the final consumer get the benefit, and how does he turn out to support the country or benefits us as profit? Competitive analysis is critical. Sometimes risk analysis is not done at all because the person believes so much in his project, he thinks that nothing can go wrong. Legal issues, ownership, no assumption. So every proposal or every concept needs to say what are your what are the things that will go wrong, which are the risks, and what are the things that should go right for you to be able to do well, which are your assumptions that makes you feel that this project is going to go good. So it is just critical that some of these things come out quite critically based on what we've seen over the years. People project profits very high to make people feel like, okay, this is the best project to go out for. Target markets are not clearly identified, which will mean, okay, if you don't have a target market, you haven't done that market analysis, then who are you serving? And sometimes there is over-diversification. Now, like I said, that is the traditional way of doing things. Now we are moving into a world, or we have moved into the world since 2015, that is focusing on sustainable finance and green ways of doing things. So under the sustainable finance, we are talking about, yes, there are a lot of other people who can finance your project. It's not only the bank. Banks are no longer having the monopoly of absolute power over anything. Some of these institutions that you can see on these slides understand some of the things that you want to do even better than the financial institutions or the investors, depending on where they specialize in. So for instance, you look at Green Climate Fund, and they are specific areas that they are focusing. So based on your research, based on the type of research you want to do, you can be quick to go to the right places, though a lot more of these people also partner with the bank to do this. So this is just to say, financing has changed. It is now blended. I can go to Wangara to take 5 cedis, go to Solidarity based on or depending on what I'm doing. And also, we cannot take out totally the role, for instance, that governments play in what we do now, because the world has moved on into a territory where we are talking about low carbon economy and all that. It is very difficult to do without government. So things like government will have to make sure they implement policy like command and control, where they are making sure that we don't pollute the environment, charge people when they do the wrong thing, but also do incentive-based, market-based incentives, just like the sample we have here, where a national institution like the Ministry of Finance can give an indemnity to maybe the World Bank to provide a guarantee for a project that we are carrying out, maybe in Lancaster, for instance. So there are a lot of opportunities now for us to take advantage of all the funding that is out there. And I know that most of you have an idea of some of these green areas than even some of us. But I just want to say that there is a lot more opportunity that we can take advantage of from now, and also from learning from our teams. I think the bigger thing is collaboration, so that we can leverage on everybody's skills. Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity.
Fantastic. Thanks, Stan. I think that was very, very comprehensive to cover that out in 15 minutes. And it's interesting that you've actually alluded to the theme of the next speaker. So, but as you were speaking, I found something very interesting. I mean, the average researcher hearing you speak never consider research as a product, or research products or research dimensions as a project that financial institutions can actually fund. And that for me is probably a new way of thinking for researchers, a new dimension where you never consider there's always a lot of focus on international grants, which is understandable. But the point is, even international grants are moving towards impact-based projects that have got some commercial indications. So basically, you cannot be doing the things you used to do before. There has to be a blended approach to funding. Thank you so much, Stan. I'm sure we're going to come to a few more interaction. That kind of leads me nicely to our next speaker. So our next speaker, it's a climate scientist and a professor at the University of Missouri, Kansas, in the US, where he has served as chair of the Department of Geosciences for over 4 years. He also served as an appointee of the Mayor of Kansas City, Missouri, and the city's Environmental Management Commission, and has testified before the South African Parliament Portfolio Committee on Science and Technology and the Climate Change Committee of the Nigerian House of Representatives. In the US, he has also testified at the United States House of Rep for the US House Select Committee on Energy Independence and Global Warming. Recently, he was senior consultant at the African Development Bank, supporting development of strategies for the bank's green finance and green development initiatives and programs. It gives me absolute pleasure. Oh, by the way, I think he deserves a round of applause because right now it's about 4 a.m. Jim, is that correct? It's 4 a.m. in the US. So it's an absolute pleasure to wake him up so early to give us some underlying principles with respect to green finance climate. And so it's an absolute pleasure to welcome Professor Jimmy Adegoke. Over to you, Prof.
Yeah, thank you, Aiken. That was a very generous introduction. Appreciate that very much. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen now, and I'm pleased to be on this webinar and to participate here. So I'm going to take off from where my good friend Stan left off. He mentioned a couple of buckets, funding buckets, several different, and one of those grants, which were more, where those of us in academia are more familiar with grants. We normally, when we're looking for money, we're looking for grants. A grant is somebody who gives you money and you don't have to pay back to that person. But he also talked about impact investment, where there is some give and take there and some expectation there. So this Green Climate Fund cuts across those first two buckets, grants or impact investment type space. As Aiken said, I'm a climate scientist, and a number of us here are either environmental folks. Our background is environment, related to the environment in some way. The Lancaster Center of the Environmental Center at Lancaster that sort of brought us all together under the RECIRCULATE project. It's focused on environmental issues across the world. But this is a slide I think most of us are familiar with, right? So you can see global emissions, the circles on the left there, they're both global maps. These are the major sources of global emissions of carbon dioxide from fossil burning across the world. The larger the circle, the larger their contribution to CO2. Of course, we know that there's a very strong link between CO2 and climate, global warming, and changes in climate that we're experiencing now and in the future. To the right is the risk, the vulnerability to impacts of climate change. Okay, so the lighter colors show areas that have less vulnerability. So, they may be impacted, but they have, your vulnerability is a combination of your exposure to the risk and then your ability, your capacity to deal, to manage those that impact or that exposure. So the darker colors show that Africa, which has very little contributions to CO2 emissions, that's actually where you have the greatest vulnerability to climate change, because the impacts are there, as they are in every part of the world. But what is lacking in Africa is the capacity to manage those impacts, to deal with those impacts. So the vulnerability is much higher there. So This is an interesting slide. We're talking about money in this webinar and how to access funds. So this is a slide that shows the various buckets, to which climate finance is going. So the world everybody's aware that climate change now it has gained traction globally. And I think everybody on this call would know, for instance, that there was a Paris Agreement a few years ago, and so there's been some focus. Just as Stan was saying towards the end of his talk, that now there are opportunities for all kinds of blended financial products. A good number of those, the new monies that have come to play in the last decade, decade and a half or so, it's in this area of climate finance. Is to deal with the issues of climate change, either from a mitigation point of view to reduce the CO2 impact, or from an adaptation point of view to deal with which in that case deals with managing the impacts, as opposed to reducing the CO2, which is mitigation. But so you can see this shows that globally, actually, only 3%, only 3% of the global climate finance is coming to Africa. So this number is in billions, actually, but you can see how it is spread across the world. Western Europe 106. East Asia and Pacific, there's 238. The Americas 93, but Africa right there is 19. Remember the previous slide where we showed that the most vulnerable countries, the most vulnerable parts of the world, it's right here in sub-Saharan Africa. Yet we're only receiving 3% of the global climate finance. So there's a big gap there. The point I want to make with this at this point is that there's also a recognition that in global circles that we need to address that gap. So there's an opportunity. There's an opportunity to play to access major funding to address issues that may be of concern, and that folks on this call are interested in, the kinds of things that we deal with, ecosystems, water, pollution, those types of things. So Green Climate Fund is one of the vehicles. It's an international fund it's a fairly new fund, okay, that was established to sort of be a vehicle for bringing in, harnessing new monies, new funding. You can see that the whole conversation about the Green Climate Fund just started about 10 years ago. And it only became operational, and the first sets of funding was just 5 years ago, actually, in terms of the number of the actual monies that has gone out. The first set of grants of funding that was crowded in to this Green Climate Fund was done in 2014, and today is that's just 6 years ago. The Green Climate Fund, I'm not particularly sure why we're focusing on Green Climate Fund specifically here on this webinar, but I assume that the organizers know that the Green Climate Fund is just one out of several other funds, similar funds like this. There's the GEF, Global Environmental Facility. There are many other climate-related funds that sit in that bucket that we call climate finance. But since I've been asked to talk about a Green Climate Fund, I'm going to focus on that. So the portfolio of this Green Climate Fund is split into two, right? So whatever monies they have by design, and by their constitution or by their operating principles, they need to redirect those funds into 50%, a 50% split between adaptation and mitigation. The interesting thing also, as you can see here, in the third bullet point there, is that 50% of the adaptation resources goes is sort of ring-fenced for African states, small islands, small islands, and then least developed countries. So these are the countries that within that circle that I showed you earlier on, where you have that are high vulnerability type spaces. So what this tells us is that there's quite a bit. This is a vehicle that was designed in such a way that there's an inbuilt advantage for African countries, to sort of do well in terms of accessing funding here. So that's an important point to note. And this may be one of the reasons why we're focusing on Green Climate Fund, because some of the other funds are not mandated to channel funds the way the Green Climate Fund is. Okay, so what are the areas that the Green Climate Funds focuses on? They call these strategic result areas. So there's energy and access to energy. Of course, usually green energy. So there's transportation, there's cities and industries, forests and land use. Those are the areas where you have the mitigation type grants normally focus on those areas, because that's where you have an opportunity to reduce emissions. But there's also this other area of health, food, agriculture, and water security, which is what we do in, that's our focus area in RECIRCULATE. There's livelihoods, there's ecosystems and ecosystem services, and then there's infrastructure. These are areas where you have opportunities to increase the resilience of communities, of countries, to reduce the impact of climate change in all of those areas. So there's quite a bit of space here to operate and to play in. So if you want to develop a proposal to the Green Climate Fund, you have to bear in mind what they call their investment criteria. And there are 6 of them. These are the guiding principles by which, or the lenses through which your proposal, when you put your proposal together and you submit it to Green Climate Fund, this is how they're going to evaluate your proposal. The first is the impact potential. How much does your proposal, your ideas that you're trying to ask for money for, how much does it provide an opportunity to shift the paradigm, to change the way of doing business, to have a transformational impact? That's what we're talking about here. Is it a project that would have legs underneath it? In other words, does it have a sustainable development potential? Can it go on? Can it produce other co-benefits? They're not going to just fund your project if this is a 2-3 year project, and once you're done, the project itself is done, and even the benefits of the project is done. So does your project have a potential to continue to yield benefits to the recipients of whichever country or whichever area you're focusing on. Does the project have very strong on-the-ground country ownership? You need to demonstrate efficiency and effectiveness, and then it must respond to certain very clear needs, very, very clear needs on the ground as well. So let me move on to, so these are the various types of vehicles, funding vehicles that the Global Climate Fund would employ. You know, you can get a loan, you can get a concessional loan. There you can design the projects to be, you know, just an entire grant, you know, just a grant, or maybe a reimbursable grant, or the Green Climate Fund can actually purchase equity. They can invest and become a co-owner, you know, of your project with you as well, or they might provide guarantees. You know, this is sort of a de-risking strategy, you know, for certain projects. So I know Stan covered some of this in his talk. So I'm going to move on. I know that most of us, you know, generally are looking for grants, you know, and there's significant opportunity for grant funding through the GCF vehicle as well. So thinking about putting a project together, okay, there are a couple of things that are important to keep in mind here. You know, but I want to mention that the Global Climate Fund is not the place to go to for you know, your individual projects, okay, your personal project or your entrepreneurship type project. You know, the way this is structured, you know, is that you have to have national buy-in. You know, you have to think about how to scale up your problem up to a point where and connect that problem to national priorities. You know, so you have to build a partnership around you know, to be able to even get in the door in terms of how to do this. And that partnership could include private sector entities. It could include a bank in a particular country, but it certainly has to include, you know, maybe it is the Ministry of Finance or the Ministry of Environment in your country. You know, so that's the structure of how you get this done. You can also do grants at a regional level. So a bunch of countries can come together. The reason why this is important is because most Green Climate Fund proposals require co-funding, okay? So you have to leverage, you know, maybe monies that the country has already budgeted to do something on, you know, maybe municipal water sanitation projects. Maybe you're interested in sanitation, or you're interested in some other thing. You know, in the national budget, there's already money there to do some things in those areas. You know, you have to leverage that. The country has to agree with you that, well, let's leverage that, you know, and take that into a proposal development process. But how do you put a proposal together? The interesting thing about Green Climate Fund, and this was the subject of a lot of negotiations, but was eventually approved as a funding window. You can ask for up to 1.5 million as a project preparation grant. So this is just to help you put a project together. You know, a Green Climate Fund proposal, I'm working on one now, usually would take about almost 2 years to put one proposal together. You know, it's not something you can do in a hurry or that you can rush through. It would take you usually between 6 to 18 months, you know, sometimes up to 24 months to actually get a project funded, because of the steps you need to go through. But there's a window where to get funding up to 1.5 million to help you prepare a competitive project. So that's important to put that in mind. And how you get that? I indicated that here. There are the process that you have to go through. It's a multi-step process, and it involves quite a bit in terms of putting together a successful Green Climate Fund proposal. But there is a new window. There's a window that is called a simplified approval process. Okay. This is for projects that are less than 10 million. So you can do, if you develop a project, 7 million, 8 million, less than 10 million, that can go through this window, and it's a much more simplified project, maybe even in about 6 months or so. If you know what you're doing and you have the right partnerships, you can get funded through this SAP window. Okay, but that's available. That's available there. A major or a full GCF proposal can be 100 million. It can be that large. It just depends on So there's serious money available here, but it requires intentionality and care. And a very deliberate process to build the required partnerships, make the required connections, and then put something together. So this is a window that's available to us as well. If we're willing to put in the work, the kinds of collaboration and partnership that already exist through RECIRCULATE, you can leverage that and then expand it and then connect it to national sources, to put something like this together. So in terms of funded projects, this is at last year, quite a bit of funding has gone out already. And you can see that Africa has about 36 projects that have been funded. Okay. Asia Pacific 40, and those projects are spread between adaptation, mitigation is green, adaptation is the blue one here, and then there's the blended projects, or the projects that have both adaptation or mitigation as Okay, so I didn't want to end this without talking about a little bit about the African Development Bank. There are the bank is really interested and is playing a significant role in trying to help raise that number of, remember I told you only 3% of global climate funds is coming to Africa. So there's a major push in the bank right now over the next 5 years or so to really scale up, So there's an opportunity for partnership, really, to get this done. And where the African Development Bank becomes really important is in the bank is already, as at today, as at this year, over 40% of the projects that the bank is funding, can be classified as climate finance as well. So they can be leveraged. So they can be, remember I said GCF requires co-funding, So that's where the bank really comes in. And will be willing to play to be able to if we to collaborate, if you come in with the right ideas, the windows are there to leverage some of what the bank is already doing. Remember, the bank funds its shareholders, and the shareholders are countries. So all of these projects that the bank is funding in the different parts of Africa, they're owned by, those projects are country projects. Okay, so
Please wrap up, sir.
Yeah, so they fit into that possibility for funding. So this is my last slide here. I've talked about interdisciplinary collaborative spaces. That's what we need to do. We need to continue to do what RECIRCULATE is doing, because these types of funding spaces, you cannot get this funding without very strong collaboration and very strong ideas that come through these types of collaboration that we already have going. So let me leave it here, and perhaps maybe we might take some questions later on. Back to you, Aiken.
Thank you so much, Prof. That's absolutely fantastic. And actually, you're very, very correct. So the whole range of green financing opportunities globally, but I think we're particularly interested in the climate finance because of its focus on ring fencing and preferability as far as Africa is concerned. But ultimately, like you said, there's a whole lot of collaboration required and intentionality for that to be the case. But interestingly, on the call, and we're working with very, very massive partners and also very high-level institutional partners, but just to expose to everyone that the opportunities actually abound at different levels, whether individually, like Stan spoke about, or on an institutional level with natural priority alignment, as the case may be. So thank you so much, Prof. So what we want to do very quickly is get a feel of the room in terms of their feelings on the first two presentations through a Mentimeter session very quickly, and then we move to the last two speakers to wrap it up. So thank you so much, Prof. And so I want to ask everyone, please, if you look at the chat section of the Teams platform, you could click on the link there and respond to these questions very quickly, and we'll kind of project this on the screen to get a sense of the room. And there are about 4 quick questions. The first question is, what sources of equity finance might you most likely consider after this session? Because I'm aware that most researchers just think about grants. But the point is, you know that you'll be surprised at that other leverages of financing beyond just grants. So the question is, what other sources of equity financing might you consider besides just traditional grants at the end of today, the things you never used to consider before? So let's get a sense of the room. I think the idea is to get people to engage and think about funding differently. That's the whole idea of today. Because if you focus on just one avenue of funding, my goodness, then you might struggle. But the point is, Stan spoke about blended financing leverages, and Prof also spoke about pockets of funding. And so you have to view yourself as a researcher, as an entrepreneur, as a professional, having the capacity to tap into these ranges of buckets. So it looks like angel investors are looking like the preferred option. Can we keep voting, please? Then I can call it off and we can move to the next question. So I noticed that nobody wants to ask me for money. So nobody's choosing personal, which seems to be interesting. Nobody wants to ask Kirk for money on the call. Nobody's speaking personal sources. So, but I guess it's just to get everyone thinking about funding differently. So I think we can move to the next question, please. The next question is this. So would you consider exploring other sources of sustainable funding after the webinar? Let's go, please. Please, let's try and put some votes in. And also, it's also okay to vote in the chat if you cannot get access to the link you've been provided. So I'm still waiting to see somebody say no. So would you consider exploring other sources of sustainable funding after the webinar? So 7, that's good. So I think I was hoping, maybe I was wanting to find out if somebody was going to say no. But I think the idea of this webinar is to get you thinking differently, thinking outside the box as far as funding is considered. So I think we can move to the next question, okay? And the next question is, I have access to adequate, regular information about research funding opportunities in my area, yes or no? I have access to adequate and regular information. So how many people actually have access to adequate and regular information about research funding opportunities in your area? Please, let's keep voting if we can. Thank you. Let's keep voting. Then I would, okay. So it seems to be some kind of a balance. So some do have access to regular information and others don't. So I think the point I want to make here is this. So you need to almost think about funding from a perspective of knowing who gives money. Like I always say, it doesn't make sense to be looking for money and don't know who gives money. So I guess for everyone listening to me, one of the things I've done, for example, in my own profession, is the fact that I remember several years ago, I spent some time producing an Excel spreadsheet, it's very comprehensive, of over 150 international organizations, institutions, and bodies who give funding in research, education development, and professional capacity building. So I have that Excel spreadsheet. On the Excel spreadsheet, I've got when they give funding, why they give funding, who they've given funding before, when might the next call come, because what it does is it keeps me prepared to apply for funding. And why is that important? Most funding opportunities, especially for the individual ones, when the calls come through, it's just a short space of time. If you don't respond to it, well, it's very short deadlines. And so preparation is absolutely crucial. Okay, so access to information, who give funding, I think for me is something that individuals should invest in. Okay, last question. Last question. My institution or employer provides effective support for my research grant application efforts. So do you agree? Strongly agree? Agree? You have no opinion? You disagree? Or you strongly disagree? Let's get a feel for the room. My institution and employer provides effective support for my research grant application efforts. Do you agree? Strongly agree? You have no opinion? You disagree strongly? Let's see a sense of the room. Because you know why this is very important here? Because most of the time, researchers, academics, you are busy people. I mean, Kirk will be speaking in a minute, but I can imagine if you're to put together a funding application, it requires you, for example, gathering the CVs of partners, gathering support letters, negotiating who is getting what on the funding, discussing contributions. You have to do some financial modeling, some budgeting, writing the proposal. That's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And so what most institutions do is that they actually have a structure, a support system in place to help academics, to help researchers, individuals, to be able to respond quickly to grant application opportunities. And so for me, if your institution or your organization is not given the right support, I think that consideration should happen. I know Kirk will speak about this, and I'll ask you about it. I think even Ruth will speak about it. There are many institutions internationally who have figured out that the appropriate support for grant applications for the success of those grants is non-negotiable. I mean, an academic will do better if all he or she has to worry about is just to write an application or the proposal. But if other things like budgeting and partnership arrangement is being taken care of by a support system, then it makes things easier. So you can see in the room, I think there's a good sense that some people agree that the organizations support them. But equally, it seems like the similar numbers don't actually have those kinds of support, which is what this quick question shows. It means, therefore, there's an opportunity here to take this seriously. Monies are available, but how much effort do you put into finding those monies? You can put a support system in place. So thanks very much for responding to those questions to get some kind of engagement in the room. And on that note, I'd like to move to the next speaker quickly. And so the person who is about to speak, we all know him. He's a good friend of mine and a friend of the house. He's a professor of environmental microbiology with over 30 years, well, about 30 years of research experience. His main fields are in understanding fundamental processes for affecting organic contaminant biota interactions, the availability of organic contaminants in soils. He has been awarded research funding from different bodies, NREC, BBSRC, EPSRC, GCRF, and all the CCs and all the Cs. So, and currently he's a director of the RECIRCULATE and Actuate project. And he'll be speaking to us about his experience of the funding landscape from a research perspective and the key considerations for applying and winning international funding. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome Professor Kirk Semple. You can take the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Akan. Can you hear me, Akan?
Very clearly, yes.
And you can see the slides?
Absolutely. Proceed.
Okay, thank you very much for that, that generous introduction. And I'd just like to start by thanking the two previous speakers for their really very, very interesting presentations. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. I know it's afternoon for some people here on the call, so I hope everybody is safe and well. And so Akan has given me this the title of applying for and winning international research funding. And I thought not only could this be a little bit boring, but it's also really quite an ambitious title. So in true academic style, I've changed to a personal journey into international collaboration and research. So, and it does come from a very sort of strong academic perspective. So for academic researchers on the call, you may be familiar with some of this. For those who do not work in the academic environment, but perhaps work with academics, this could be quite familiar as well. Anyway, working and being successful in the academic environment is a challenge. Okay, it's not easy, and there are lots of pitfalls and traps and challenges that we have to negotiate as we move through our academic career. Not least, of course, is this notion of publish, publish, publish. And the idea of publish or perish. We've also got issues around funding, where we are constantly on the lookout for research funds to help promote the things that we're very interested in, and also to help with our academic career. And of course, on top of all of that is the day job, which I'll call, is in teaching. And some of us have incredibly high teaching workloads, which means that impacts on our abilities to write papers and write and submit grant proposals. And I've been in this game, shall we call it, for over 30 years now, which makes me feel very, very old. And I've seen massive changes. So when I first came into academia as a sort of young and naive PhD student, through my postdoc and into the early years of my academic career, the idea of the ivory tower was very, very much a real thing. It's not something I was particularly comfortable with or enjoyed working in. It sort of led to restricted or siloed mentality. And really, in my experience in the Department of Environmental Science here at Lancaster University, there were very strong, very dynamic disciplinary groups. Okay, and I was part of the environmental chemistry group, but those groups were very siloed in their thinking, in terms of collaboration across the department and in the wider university. And the reason really for that was that there was massive competition for resources, whether it was lab space, office space, internal funding, university funding, external funding, whatever it might have been. The competition was intense, and actually promoted that notion of a sort of siloed mentality where we would all work within our respective research areas, planning world domination through our research activities. However, in about 2008, the university had a bit of an epiphany and decided to carry out an experiment. And I think that experiment actually challenged some of the concerns I had around the sort of ivory tower, where we actually brought together 3 different departments: biological sciences, the non-medical elements of biological sciences, environmental science, and geography, under the so-called Lancaster Environment Centre. And for me, this was revolutionary, really. And I think within the UK, actually revolutionary, because what it allowed us to do was to interact across different disciplines. And of course, not only within the sciences, the natural sciences, but also across elements of social sciences as well. So ultimately, we have an entity which has, it's the biggest department in the university. It's very, very research active. It has lots of students, particularly lots of PhD students and master's students, but also it has an enterprise and business partnerships element to it, which allows private sector companies to interact with academics and students to deal or investigate problems that they might have within a research environment. Very importantly, and from that, the Centre for Global Eco-Innovation has emerged, which has become a very, very powerful element within the research framework within the university. Of course, we've supported the co-location of companies, small to medium-sized enterprises, and we've developed international collaborations and partnerships through various projects, both at departmental but also at university level. But when you look at it in the whole, what we have under the Lancaster Environment Centre is something approaching 500 environmental specialists or professionals under the one roof, and makes it one of the largest entities of its type, certainly in Europe. And of course, research is very much at the heart of this, and it is a challenge. It's a daily challenge. It's something that we focus on a lot, and it does lead to some important questions. So thinking about funding, sources and opportunities, asking the question, well, am I actually working in the right area? Do I need to change direction? Can I do this alone? Or can I actually collaborate either within my department or elsewhere? And of course, that is very personal to me, because for a long, long time, I was very interested in pollution research in the UK funding environment. And of course, nowadays, and for the last 10 years, very little of that has been supported by national funding opportunities. So it became clear to me that actually I was actually not working perhaps in the right area, and I had to change direction. Can I just interrupt? Can everyone switch off their microphones, please? Because
yes,
there
please.
Is some
switch off your microphone, please.
There is some distortion on the line.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, can everybody switch off the microphones? Thank you. Okay, and collaboration has become a very, very important issue. Should we be working with people internally within our own departments or within the university? Do we need to collaborate with external partners? Should those be national or international collaborations? And should it be beyond the traditional academic sector, and beginning to develop collaborations with private sector and civil society to add a new layer or a new dimension to our project proposals, to give them an additional advantage? And the other essence of this is, which I kind of alluded to earlier, is, do I have to do all of this on my own? Well, let me tell you folks, in the early days, as academics at Lancaster, we did have to do everything on our own. We had to, bring people together. We had to work out the finances. We had to do everything that was required before we even wrote the proposal itself. But fortunately, the university sector is investing more and more in systems to support this. And this has been a massive transformation for me in the last 10 or 15 years. So collaboration is clearly important. It's something that I really do subscribe to within the research environment, and of course the winning of research funding. And that, you know, we shouldn't always be looking to the outside. We should be looking at the strengths that we have in our own department, to bring together, to offer up something that says something about our department and how powerful and interesting it can be in the research environment. And, you know, we're doing this more and more on a daily basis. And then thinking beyond the department, but still within the university, perhaps within our own faculties or schools. And another example is where I'm now working with engineers and working with private sector related to the faculty. And then more broadly across the university, how can the research power within the other faculties across the university contribute to offer up a much more powerful and well-rounded research proposition that stands a chance of being funded in a very competitive environment. But the thing that's closest to my heart amongst all of this is the thing that I'm most proud of is the collaborations that we've been able to develop with our international partners. And for RECIRCULATE, of course, and has been mentioned already by Akan, you know, the really rich and valuable collaborations with the University of Benin in Nigeria, our own campus in Accra in Ghana, the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research in Ghana, ATPS in Kenya, NCST in Malawi, Copperbelt University in Zambia, and UST in Botswana. And it's the combination of bringing all of these people together that has actually resulted in some very rich and rewarding research experiences. And collaboration is absolutely at the heart of this. And, you know, I can't underestimate the importance of this, the equitable nature of the trust and the teamwork that's involved, the exchange and sharing of ideas and information, the support and assistance that we can all bring to the team that will lead to not only successful outcomes, but also meaningful outcomes. And this notion of co-design, co-development and co-delivery of research proposals, research projects is absolutely central to this collaborative effort. And it's only really through that we can really deliver the impact from our research that will make a difference to our global society. Now, the other thing that I have to flag here is that, you know, this isn't just about individual researchers from different departments and different faculties and different universities and other organizations. This is also about investment by our institutions. And so prior to the Global Challenges Research Fund ever becoming a reality, the senior management of the university at Lancaster and with our collaborators that I've mentioned were smart enough to realise that we needed to bring people together. So a series of workshops and face-to-face workshops in the UK, but also in West Africa, were enabled to allow that those collaborative juices to start flowing that ultimately supported submissions and successful submissions to the Global Challenges Research Fund. And some people are maybe a little bit skeptical about this, but I personally believe that this injection of over £1 billion of funding into the UK and international research environment has transformed research, you know, between the UK and its international partners. Absolutely transformational, and it's been allowed us to carry really meaningful research and capacity building across the globe. And so, just by way of example, really, these are the projects that have been successful in the last 5 or 6 years. The first one there, which is italicized, actually was transformational for me, because what it allowed me to do was actually to move my research interests from that pollution based research to thinking about the circular economy, resource recovery from waste, the waste energy food nexus, and from that actually underpinned the great collaborations and projects of RECIRCULATE and Actuate, and now most recently our British Council funded project, where we're looking at digital innovation and capacity building from stuff that has come out of these international projects. Absolutely transformational. So some messages, I guess, from my personal experiences. Track record is very important. Okay, publishing is very important, but there is a challenge here about quantity of publications versus quality of publication. And for me, in my early career, I was solely interested in publishing as many papers as I possibly could. But as I grew up as an academic, I realized that quantity is not the only issue. It was about the quality of the publications as well, the weight of them that was very important, particularly when we're competing in a really crowded space with regard to research funding. Do I need to do it on my own? Absolutely not. Collaboration is absolutely key here, not only within your own discipline, but from different disciplines. Okay, so it might be across STEM, okay, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and so on. But of course, beyond STEM as well, social sciences, entrepreneurial sciences, management sciences, health and medicine. How you bring those together under one framework is crucial. The other thing I would say is grant writing, unless you're incredibly lucky, is a learned activity. You need to learn the skill of writing research proposals. So practice makes perfect. And the more you apply, the more chance you have of winning. Okay. I would like to say that, you know, every grant proposal that I've submitted, I've got funded. Well, that's just a big fat lie. Okay, it is not true. It's only through understanding and through practice that success comes. And of course, you have to also think outside your personal research box. Okay, get away from that monolithic thinking. The big funding opportunities that have been talked about, particularly by Jimmy in the previous presentation, are massive. They're multidisciplinary, they're multi-sectoral, so that involves more than just one discipline, and of course more than one sector. And I would also say is that preparation and planning prevents poor performance, the 5 Ps. There may be variants on this, some are more polite than others, but you know, if you're not organized and you're not planning, you're not thinking about what might be coming up, then you're up against it. So preparation is absolutely crucial. And of course, you have to be persistent. You will get knocked back. Things will not work, but you have to be persistent. And very often, just because your proposal gets rejected doesn't mean you say it's rubbish. It means that you can actually take it and refine it and recycle it to improve that proposition and ultimately, hopefully, get it funded as well. So what does success look like? I'm just going to finish off here. So what does success look like? Well, to my mind, one way of thinking about it, and in terms of climate change, of course, I think this is quite appropriate. It's a bit like an iceberg. Okay, so when you think about the iceberg, there's only very little on the surface. Okay, so you think about your grants awarded, the numbers of PhD students and the size of your research group, the funding, the publications, the nice shiny laboratory facilities and equipment that you might have acquired over time. You're also thinking about, you know, international recognition, being invited to, you know, international conferences to give keynote presentations, promotion within your organization, hopefully coming with a pay rise, and maybe international prizes and awards, okay? And that's, you know, that's sort of, I would say, typical, and in some ways is linked to that sort of notion of the ivory tower that we're all trying to get away from. But below the surface, there are massive challenges. There's the frustration and failure, disappointment of not getting that proposal funded or not getting that paper published in the journal that you wanted to. There's the working environment and the politics within that can be very difficult to navigate. There's also the changes in the nature of funding and how you adapt to the funding environment. And then there's dedication. Okay, you know, I think personally that I've got the best job in the world. I love my job. But when I sit down and think about it, I think about the long hours, the hard work, the practices that I've had to develop, the personal sacrifice, not spending time with my kids or my wife because I'm writing a grant proposal, the persistence that I have to bring to bear in order to try and succeed, patience, person management and diplomacy, something that I've really had to work at. I'm still not the best diplomat. Sometimes I have to really bite my tongue, but I've learned. And of course, having to be, you know, we're all opportunists, and we all have to think about how we can develop our networks through those dedicated principles. But really, what does success look like? For me, this has changed over time, and this is where I am now. So for me, success is about the difference that my research projects with my colleagues makes to people, in the UK, in sub-Saharan Africa, in West Africa, wherever it might be, and therefore, the impact that my research brings to bear on society. So I'll finish there. I'm very conscious of time. So thanks very much for listening, and hopefully I'll be able to take some questions a bit later on. So with that, I'll hand back to Akan, and yeah, we'll continue the discussion. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. That's absolutely fantastic. It's a really powerful story. So before I invite, I want to make a few points, because I know that there are folks in the room who are probably taking some points down. So before I invite our last speaker, I want to make a few points. So, and this is very important. So normally when I come across a researcher in an African country, Nigeria or in Ghana, and they're applying for a grant, there always seems to be a common denominator. For some reason, they're always in a hurry. Oh my goodness, can you help me? What's the problem? Oh, I have to submit this proposal in 2 days' time, and I'm in a hurry. So you keep thinking, why are researchers always in a hurry to submit proposals, and the deadlines are always short by nature? So and it gets you thinking differently, that maybe with some ample preparation, you could reduce your potential to always be in a hurry, because it's when you are in a hurry, you make all the mistakes. And I'm sure a good grant assessor will be able to sell a grant that has been rushed within 5 to 10 minutes of opening the grant. Spelling mistakes, grammatical errors. No donor wants to see that. So a few simple steps is like, so for example, most big grants of this nature would ask you to submit a CV, and they would normally ask for a 1-page or 2-page CV. I mean, have you met an academic professor with a 2-page CV? Traditionally, that's almost impossible. I mean, Kirk's CV is like 25, 30 pages. It's a lot of work to have to convert a 25-page CV to 2 or 1 page. And so you get these simple things that you could prepare in advance and put in place. So why am I saying this though? I know on my laptop, maybe because of the nature of my job, I've got a folder called 1-page CVs. In the folder, there are over 150 CVs of different partners. I've got another folder, it's titled 2-page CVs. In that folder, there are over 100 different CVs of different partners in different disciplines. That is preparation. So when a grant comes up, I know, okay, well, this is the partner, this is their CV. Now I only have to take permission. Are you interested? That's the first level. simple, smart ways of working a bit easier just to increase our opportunities and chances of winning grants. Now, Kirk was saying that the more you are grant for, or the more you apply for grants, the more you win them. The more you apply for grants, the more the opportunities of you winning them. But even that, the better you get at actually writing those grants. So most of the time, when I meet researchers or academics who are applying for grants, for some reason, they seem to always be the lead. No, you don't always have to be the lead. You can be a partner on somebody else leading. But for that to happen, you have to have the partners in the first place. They always have to know you are available to call upon you for a new grant opportunity, where all you have to worry about in some cases is help support the review of the proposal and submit a CV. It's about this understanding of planning that's absolutely crucial to increase your capacity to apply and win these grants. Now, a common thread, this now leads to our next speaker. A common thread from Stan's talk to Jimmy's talk to Kirk, a thread they kept repeating over and over again, if you remember or if you notice, is partnerships, is collaboration, is partnerships. You don't have to do this on your own. You can form your own funding crew. Call it a nice name, your funding partnership, your framework, whatever the case is. So, because of that, I felt it was important for us to almost interview. I'm almost going to interview our next speaker because she's actually a partnership expert. So Ruth is currently the head of enterprise and business partnerships at the Lancaster Environment Center, and she leads us a team of staff, and our focus is towards creating impact from research in partnership with businesses and other science users. She has taken a lead role in coordinating activities within and between science and user communities, identifying collaborative opportunities, optimizing professional development capacity and learning. She works in a wide multidisciplinary team across science and technology in Lancaster, and it's an incredible bridge, if you like, between academic expertise and industry. And she's currently a deputy director at the RECIRCULATE project. I want to almost like have an interaction with her. So there's no presentation because I felt it necessary to almost pry a bit further as to the theories or the workings of partnerships. Because in the era we live, you cannot have a successful grantsmanship without partnerships. And so Ruth, thanks for joining me. It's good to see you.
Thank you, Akan, and thank you for that lovely introduction.
Fantastic. So I guess my first question is this. In your view, I mean, you've been doing this for quite a while now, and I know I know the way you work and how you work. So Ruth is somebody where, if you like, she sees a call. It's almost instinctive. She just goes, okay, who should I put together for this call? It's almost like a default. When she sees a call, I get a mail, who can we put together? Which partners can we conduct to make this call? So I keep thinking, is how she works. So in my mind, Ruth, what does a good partnership look like? What do you think?
Okay, so I think to start with, let's unpick what we mean by good.
Okay, that's good to know.
It doesn't just mean okay. You know, for me, good partnerships are successful, they're meaningful, and they're lasting. And I think that's really important. You know, we're in this for a long game. And as with all relationships, you've got to work quite hard to keep that communication going, to understand different individuals. And I guess increasingly for me, it's about shared values and that commonality of purpose. So when you're thinking about a partnership, look for people that think like you do sometimes in terms of ambition and purpose. And I think that's really good. And obviously communication is key. You know, these things take time and they don't just happen immediately. And it's for these sorts of events like Participate that connect people to other people that you would never normally run into in your normal life. And it's that diversity of individuals as well that you need to think of.
So, you know, you just said about talk about communication and shared values. And when I meet researchers, I mean, I think Stan spoke about this, even Jimmy and Kirk spoke about this. I mean, a researcher works in a bubble, so I'm okay where I am. I remember I was having a conversation in a meeting one day, and I was talking about it's important for researchers to think about business partners in industry. And as I was, I guess, saying that, the one prof just said, I think you're going too far. I said, what do you mean, prof? And he goes, we haven't even spoken about partnership with the next department next door in the university. And you're speaking about us going outside the university for a partner with an industry outside, externally. So I guess my point is, how was Lancaster? I mean, I think you've been very critical with this. How has Lancaster built a strong reputation in partnership working?
I suppose the first thing to say there is it's been developed over many years.
Okay.
So it's probably about 15 years of time. So we've had time to kind of do things wrong and realize what works right.
Okay.
And the first thing probably to mention as well is we have dedicated staff whose job is to actually initiate that partnership working. So these people are the bridges that you talked about, that Kirk talked about, between the academic community and any external end users. And they could be businesses, third sector organizations, they could be policy. So having those dedicated staff with the time and the resources to help make those connections is really important. And I know a lot of people on the call today, you'll have all engaged in our knowledge exchange training activities, of which we're planning some more, incidentally. So I think having that understanding of where you sit in that space and being charged with making the connections, making it work is really important.
That's actually a good point you raised, Ruth. So I know at the early part of my career, I mean, my career is still young, I believe. I used to see myself as a navigator, so connection is what I do. See, but it's actually recently in the last 5 years since I started engaging with you that I started discovering that actually what I do has a name. I'm a knowledge exchange professional. I'm that navigator between academia and industry, and it requires a series of specific skill sets. And before I go to my next question, for you to talk about the CG model, I want to maybe say a small story. I think the Africans in the room would appreciate this. So I was in a session with at the University of Benin with Professor Lawrence Zemoye and Kirk, and it was an academia industry forum, you see, and it was an amazing session, and there were lots of corporate executives and also academics in the room. At the end of the session, it was time to discuss next steps. And I remember a prof got up and he said, okay, I think the next step is let's form a committee. And then Professor Lawrence said, no chance in heaven. We are tired of committees. In the average university, there is a committee on this. There's always committee. And that kind of slows down things happening. So I like the idea of dedicated staff that helps with those navigations, which I think is very, very powerful. So can you talk about the Center for Global Eco Innovation, that model? How does it work? Okay,
so I've just popped something in the chat as well, which is a link to the website for the Center for Global Eco Innovation.
Okay.
Just before we go on to that, I think in terms of that engagement activity with external end users of research of all types, you know, a really key skill to start with is we need to listen. It's not just about pushing out information. It's talking to people, listening to what their challenges are. And from that, we can then think about how do we construct a solution for that? And I guess for the Centre for Global Eco Innovation, that's what it's all about. We are challenge-led, solution-driven. And it doesn't matter in terms of place, you know, it's how we work, not just what we do. So that model can be totally transferable. And we've seen this happening across sub-Saharan Africa, where our partners and colleagues have realized that sort of place-based anchored approach in external organizations is really one that works anywhere.
That's fantastic. So let me ask you, so if someone is listening to you now and there's an excitement and hopefully I believe that there is, and they want to start. So how do I start? Because people keep thinking, well, I like this, but I mean, I'm an introvert. So how do you advise participants to start making the right connections in your view?
Okay, so what we're doing today is making the right connections, isn't it?
And that's actually true. All
of the participate activities are about growing your networks, talking to different people, and understanding that there's a whole range of individuals out there that you could connect with. And as Kirk mentioned, you know, there's no way we ever win grants and awards on our own. We need those different knowledges, we need those different skills and attributes. and different heads to think about things. And that's when you get some really good activity moving.
Thank you so very much. So it's an absolute pleasure. Thanks for the audience. That kind of gives some interesting insights of how people should think about partnerships. Like I tell folks, and they say, I think for me, and I've come to experience this over some period of time, is the fact that your network is your net worth. And maybe a good way to look at it is this. If I ask everybody in the room and say, what would you prefer? Would you prefer I pay $10,000 in your account, like this morning, give you a check? I mean, don't ask me, but or would you prefer I give you the phone number of somebody who would pay $100,000 in your account? What would you prefer? I can imagine a majority of us would prefer to get the phone number of somebody who would pay $100,000 in the account. See, so ultimately, your partnership is your leverage, it's your network. It is what sustains you. And so I think Ruth has been doing this for a long time. It's very, very obvious for her. Partnerships is absolutely crucial, especially in the era we now live for international funding. Now, I want to turn up to the room for a little engagement, a small engagement. So a few questions I want to ask everybody, just to feel the motivations in the room with respect to how you want to proceed. So if you look at the chat section now, thank you so much, Ruth, much appreciated. If you look at the chat section now, you would see a link. If you click on that, there is a series of questions I'd like us to respond to wrap it off. Okay, so the first question is, it's a bit of a, if you like, not a trick question, but could be controversial, but it's an important question for us to ask. And the question is this: who is most responsible for increasing the winning of international grants by African academics? Is it your institution, yourself, your government, or your network? Who, in your view, do you think is most responsible for increasing the winning of international grants by African academics or researchers? In your view, who do you think is most responsible? Is it your institution? Is it yourself? Is it your government? Is it your network? I like what I'm seeing here already. Professor Lawrence, are you liking what you're seeing, sir? That's so cool to see. So nobody is blaming the government today. What is going on? I like this. This is fantastic. So there's a preference to yourself and your network. So even in some sense, you could probably even say your network it ties to you. So you are responsible as well for creating your network in the first place. This is so cool to see that nobody is talking about blaming the institution or hoping that the institution or government is most responsible. Actually, if you ask me, this for me would be an incredible take home today. If everybody appreciates that they are responsible for their own grant winning, they are responsible for their grantmanship, they are responsible for increasing their capacity for funding. That for me is an absolutely important lesson, which as I look at this showcase has been learned by everyone in the room. And there seems to be a big preference towards a bigger preference towards your network has been responsible for in comparison to other choices. So let's go to the second question. I really like what I see. That's fantastic. Second question is this: what would the number one thing be to allow you to be more successful in winning research funding? So just any word, a phrase, what will be the number one thing in your view? So after today, what is the number one thing, action point, move or step that would allow you to be more successful in winning research grants? So can we see some options? I like that. Research is important. You actually need to research in order to win research grants. That's fantastic. Time. I love that. So creating time, because I mean, everybody in this call, you're already busy. In the era we live, you have back-to-back webinars and Zoom calls all day long, in addition to your job. So how do you navigate your time management to be able to give some time, some work for planning your vision, preparation, I like this, planning, commitment, collaboration, working with people. These are important buzzwords and important action points that can help you to be more successful in winning this research grant opportunities. Thank you so much, guys. That's fantastic. So the third question now it says, how energized do you feel now to grow your networks to increase your opportunities for funding? How energized are you? How energized? If there's anybody in the room with all this my talking and all my gesticulation that is not feeling energized at all, maybe we should have a personal communication after the webinar. So I'm hoping people feel energized, people feel activated to grow their networks as a way of increasing their opportunities for funding. Ultimately, it's about your networks, it's about your commitment, about your collaboration, it's about your vision, it's about your research capacity, it's about your time management. You can make this happen. Thank you so much, guys. And that's fantastic. And then the last question, and it is, after the event today, can you name, I mean, maybe you have to do some more research for this one, but can you name one organization, one institution, one individual, whatever it is, that you will engage to partner with for funding success? So somebody you haven't engaged with before that you think you want to engage to increase your success for international funding. So AFDB is bold, big and bold on the screen. That's fantastic. Any other persons you haven't considered that you think you want to engage now? Just write the company or the organization on the screen, just to get a sense of the room. And this is the last question. Okay. I'm sure some folks are writing things down. CGE, I like that. So please do send an email, drop a message on the chat for information about Center for Global Eco Innovation. And folks, please think about that SME outside your university. Think about that NGO which you've never engaged. Think about another university. Think about other research partners. Think about another department in your institution that is not yours. If you want to do multidisciplinary research, to be able to apply for multidisciplinary funding, then you need to engage with other folks. So these are the things to think about in terms of engagement and collaborations to increase your funding success. And so on that note, I want to thank everybody. I think that's fine. That's okay. So maybe something else you can do for folks listening to me is when you have that outline of different funding institutions or donor agencies. For me, a simple thing I did very quickly was I subscribed to their newsletters. It has really helped incredibly. You'll be surprised. Because I discovered that these funding bodies, if they have an intention for a funding opportunity in future, the chances are they would stick that information in a newsletter. So I get this monthly or fortnightly reports or newsletters from different organizations about funding opportunities. So when I get the alert on my email, I know, okay, well, I can just scroll through, I see an opportunity, I can actually tap. But the point is, you need to subscribe to this newsletter. It's a really simple way of keeping aligned with the right information to be able to apply for these funding opportunities. And so I probably want to leave, we have about 10 minutes to wrap it up. So I want to kind of leave it open. If there are any questions to any speakers, to the specific questions, I think if you just raise up your hand, and then I would ask Alan to just call on the person. Just 1 minute, please, nothing more than 1 minute. It could be a comment, it could be a feedback, or preferably a question to any of the speakers. That will be fantastic. The room is open. Anybody, please. If nobody's, okay, John D, could you please, just for 30 seconds, 1 minute, make your comment or ask your question. Proceed, please. You have to unmute yourself, sir. Hello? Okay, so maybe what I'm going to do is this: if there's nobody,
Oh, is it
comments. Okay, yes, go on.
Okay, sorry for that.
Okay.
It's a nice presentation. I've benefited a lot from it. I want to make a request. The introduction, can we have a link to the document for the introduction? There were a lot of things that said.
Yes, you can. So actually, if you went to the, can Alan please put the Eventbrite link? The introduction actually was captured in the official invitation on the registration page of the event. So my introduction was captured there. And if you want access to the slide, at the end of this webinar, a link will be placed on the chat section, which is the link for anybody who wants access to receive a certificate of attendance from the project. And it's a very simple link with just your name as you want it to appear on your certificate. You fill your name, answer a few questions, and then you will receive certificate in your email. But also, there's a link on the chat on the actual event registration page, which the comprehensive information of my introduction is captured on there. Is that okay?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Ekwase, over to you, please. 30 seconds. What are your comments? Yes, go on, please.
Thank you. Wonderful presentation by everybody. But my question specifically is to Professor Jimmy A.
Jimmy. Okay, go on.
The Green Climate Funding.
Okay.
What we have problem with the international policies for climate change.
Okay.
Whereas some believe it do exist and some say it's a hoax. How does it affect the funding, the Green Climate Funding? How does the international politics of climate change affect the green funding?
That's an interesting question. I think Jimmy got the question.
I think I did, but the construction of the fund itself was based on very, very high level and intense political negotiation. That is why, for instance, it's one of the few vehicles that has a 50-50 split between mitigation and adaptation, you know, and they're required by law or by their constituting guidelines and policies, you know, to set aside some of their funding for low income countries and for Africa specifically. So politics is built into it, you know, already, but it's in our favor. It's in Africa's favor. If you let me, if I can say that.
Say that. That's fantastic. So Neumont, I see your hand is raised up. Is there a question or a comment or feedback? Please, Neumont, over to you. Go on. Neumont, I see your hand raised. Do you have
okay. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. Good morning. Okay, so I was going to mention that, yes, very great presentations. In the area of partnerships, I also would want to mention that maybe this is also the time to look at some lower cadres from the university system. I'm not too sure I have seen a university and a polytechnic partnering before for a research, or a university and a college of technology. So now in the bid to be able to, expand the partnership and, promote interdisciplinary work, maybe this is an area that we need to kind of like look into. Thank you.
I think that is fantastic. And I think Lawrence, Professor Lawrence wants to respond to that. I think that's absolutely spot on. It's not only about universities, polytechnics and college of education also do research, but they're never considered. Lawrence, please.
That thought is fantastic. Actually, we have been thinking around that area. We are currently in discussion with the Edo State Polytechnic, to say, and they are very good in pharmaceutical research. They want to TED for research grants.
Oh, wow, okay.
So we are working with them And we tend to also approach some of these specified, especially colleges of education, particularly that are technology-based. So, but it's a very good thought. I think
it's a really good point of consideration, actually. Even I've not considered it that way. And I mean, in Nigeria, there are well over 80 polytechnics. I'm sure the case is the same in other African countries where you have polytechnics and colleges of education. They still have academics who still do research and publish papers as a basis of promotion. And so that conversation is very, very vital. Can I now ask Mahama Quadrigo, please? Could you make your comments or ask your question, please?
Thank you, Dr. Akan. For me, it's just a comment and can also lead to questions, because we have been implementing research grant at the level of the continent at the African Union Commission. And what we have realized is that the capacity to really produce competitive research proposal is very, 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 I should say, can be improved.
That's true.
So when you are looking, I mean, I followed the presentation. It was, very instructive. It gave very useful information that can really assist us. But my question is, from the level we are, how can we really do more to ensure that we can really build the capacity to the level that we can really compete globally for this fund?
That's a very, very powerful point. And by the way, for the first thing people don't know, Mahama Quadrigo is actually a senior director at the African Union. Thank you so much for joining us today, sir. And I think this is a very, very important conversation. And maybe I want to throw that question to Kirk, because RECIRCULATE was built on the back of capacity building. And I think maybe Kirk will give a sense of what the kinds of capacity building that has happened on the back of the project. And then maybe I would like to take up a follow-up conversation on maybe how that can be scaled up on an African Union level. Over to you, Kirk, please.
Well, thanks very much, Akan, and thanks very much for the comment and question. So it's important to note that under the funding call that RECIRCULATE was funded by, capacity building was actually a key objective within the call, and within the project. And of course, what we've done, without giving you the detail of the numbers, what we've done is engaged with not only academics at the key partners across sub-Saharan Africa, but also wider stakeholder community in various face-to-face, thematically driven workshops, which are very much interactive. It's not very much, the people who are leading these talking at the participants. Is very much a dynamic environment where people have a voice and can develop their ideas in a safe and productive way. Of course, and that's been very successful, I think, and we're seeing some very good examples of outputs from that. But of course, COVID has come along. And one of the big concerns that I always had about it was that, well, the project could fall apart. We could lose communication, we could lose all of this great work that's been going on. But actually, people have really stepped up to the plate and have really engaged positively in this new digital world that we find ourselves in. So I guess there are two or three examples of that, very briefly, because I'm conscious of time. One is, of course, what we're doing right now, this whole Participate ecosystem that's been going since the middle of last year. There's also the interaction between the partners in terms of maintaining and driving forward the research in this, but also moving, and I think this is really important, how we've moved the face-to-face capacity building sort of environments to digital environment as well. So we've transferred that sort of face-to-face approach to hopefully an engaging approach through the digital media. And of course, that's really attracted some attention from not only the universities that we're in, that we're collaborating in, but also the British Council as well, and they've invested some funding in helping us to further evolve some of these capacity building elements. That's all I'll say. I hope that's answered the question.
Yeah. So I think you're very, very correct. I think the point is there is a huge need for even, and I think I agree with Mahama. A huge need for training, actually training capacity building in grant writing, like proposal writing, because it's a skill set, it can be learned. Some folks understand it carefully. And so, I mean, you can't convert your capacity because you can write a nice and amazing research paper, doesn't actually mean you can write an incredible proposal for grant. They're two different things. Correct. And once an academic tries to convert his capacity or her capacity for research papers to grant writing, they fall flat because it's a different kind of language, sensitivity that you have to kind of interact with, and even your use of words and expression to be able to connect with individuals in that level. So I think we are developing partnerships for training of or development of capacity. I think is absolutely crucial, and I think is that kind of conversation that we are currently having. So a final comment from a gentleman, Babatunde, and we can wrap this up. Babatunde, yes, please. Babatunde, are you on the call, sir? Hello?
Okay. Hello, now.
Okay, so maybe it's not maybe you can't hear me, but I think the next action point basically is just to get everybody to look at the chat section. If you are interested in engaging further, click on the chat section, leave your name and some details on the link, and then we will send you the certificate of participation. And also, if you have any questions respect to partnership, what is happening on the RECIRCULATE project, please do leave a message on the chat section and somebody will respond to you. I think on that note, I want to thank the incredible speakers. Thank you so much to Stan. You're a busy man, I know. You're probably having meetings left and right today. Thanks so much for Jimmy for waking up at 3. I mean, I actually sent Jimmy a text this morning and it was 3 a.m.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you.
It was 3 a.m.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you, Jimmy.
It's an absolute pleasure for joining and for the incredible presentation. Thanks to Kirk, what in Nigeria we call Olori Ebi, that's the godfather of the house, for insights on the personal journey.
Pleasure. Thank you, Stan.
Thank you to the godmother.
Yeah,
thank you to the godmother of partnerships, Ruth, for our insights on our understanding of the partnership navigation framework. She has been phenomenal.
That's the best teacher.
She's a godmother of partnerships. Thank you so much to Mahama for joining from the African Union, for individuals, for partner organizations, Copperbelt University, University of Benin, Igbinedion University, Lancaster University, Ghana campus, ATPS in Kenya. Thank you so much to Paul, Alan, Diane, and Samuel for all the background work for putting this together. These guys, I was literally harassing Alan on a weekend to plan for the event. Many things happen behind the scene to make an event of this nature happen. Absolute appreciation to all the participants. You've been fantastic today. And I hope you leave the session today with visions and dreams of seeing money, because there is money available. On that note, thanks, guys, and have an amazing week. God bless.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Akan. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Lawrence. Bye.
Thank you, Kirk. Bye, Jimmy.
See you all soon. Bye-bye.
Bye, Ruth.
Bye, Lawrence.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Fantastic.
Well done.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.